Hey guys, tonight we step into a world where the horizon always promises adventure, yet every wave carries a hint of danger. You trudge across the creaking deck of a pirate ship, the salty wind tugging at your hair, and the sun hangs low, like a lazy eye, watching your every move. You smell the brine, mixed with tar, rope fibers, scraping against your palms, and somewhere below deck, a barrel of rum shifts with a soft thud. Around you, the crew moves with a strange rhythm, part chaos, part choreography, shouting orders, laughter, and curses in a mix that somehow feels alive. You probably won't survive this if you think it's all swashbuckling heroics. Here, superstition rules as much as steel, and a single mistake could see you walking the plank, or worse, standing trial for theft and mutiny before the hangman's noose. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, post your location and local time in the comments. It's always fascinating to see from which corner of the globe you're sneaking a peek into this chaotic seafaring life. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Picture the notorious Caribbean seas of the early 18th century. The water is a shifting mirror of turquoise and ominous grey, and you feel the tension in the air as ships drift lazily, yet ever alert. Some carry merchants unaware of the lurking threat, others bear the grim flags of pirate crews, skulls and crossed bones, waving mockingly in the wind. You move closer to one such vessel, imagining the drama unfolding on its deck. The pirate captain struts with exaggerated authority, a sword glinting in the last light of day, and around him his lieutenants whisper secrets that historians still argue about. Did these men truly follow a democratic code, or were they subject to the whims of the most cunning, ruthless, and charismatic of their number? Even now, the smell of gunpowder and salted meat seems to cling to the old tales. You can almost hear the clash of cutlasses and the creak of masts bending under wind pressure, punctuated by the occasional barked order. Some of the lore suggests pirates slept with loaded pistols under their pillows, and in the corner, a parrot screeches, though historians still debate whether these feathered companions were truly common or later romanticized. The thrill, of course, is in imagining yourself in their boots. You feel the risk and the allure. One wrong decision, one missed boarding, and the story could end badly. And yet the myths are irresistible, full of cunning escapes, hidden treasures, and scandalous betrayals that make the mundane details of life on land seem dull by comparison. You trudge further along the deck, brushing against the ropes and the damp, salty wood, and it's easy to forget that every pirate you'll meet tonight has a tale as darkly glamorous as a thundercloud at sunset. Soon, you'll meet Blackbeard, Anne Bonny, and other infamous figures, each more scandalous than the last. But for now, just let the sounds, smells, and imagined motions of a pirate ship at dusk wrap around you. Feel the rhythm of the waves as a lullaby, a reminder that even in chaos, there's a strange, hypnotic order. You hear a soft creak, a shuffle of boots, and maybe a whispered plan that could topple a crew, or the captain himself. Some tidbits are just strange enough to linger. Did you know some pirates chewed tobacco as a kind of deterrent against sea lice? Or that some wore multiple pistols strapped across their chest for dramatic effect, rather than practicality? Historians still argue whether these small habits were widespread or simply the eccentricities of a few legendary names. But the image sticks, doesn't it? You can see it, can't you? The dramatic swagger and the roguish grin under the hat brim, and as the first stars begin to prick the sky, you sense the thrill of discovery, the weight of untold scandal waiting to be unrolled like a map of hidden islands and ill-gotten treasures. You lean against the rail, letting the night air soothe you, even as your imagination gears up for the exploits, betrayals, and secret sins of those who once ruled these waters with terror and charisma. Tonight, you're not just an observer. You're aboard, caught in a dance of history, myth, and the whispers of secrets that never quite washed ashore. The moment you meet Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard, you feel the air shift, thick, with the scent of smoke, tar, and something faintly metallic. He doesn't just walk, he prowls. A predator who knows that fear is as valuable as any sword. Torches flare along the deck of his flagship. Queen Anne's Revenge, illuminating the long black beard he braids with slow-burning fuses tucked into the hair, so that smoke curls around his face like a ghostly halo. You blink, wondering if he's part man, part myth, and a little part nightmare. You probably wouldn't want to meet him on a dark alley, let alone a narrow plank swaying over shark-infested waters. Blackbeard's charisma wasn't just for show. He understood spectacle as well as strategy. When he captured merchant vessels, he let his ship drift silently into harbor before revealing his fire-touched visage, knowing that terror alone would often lead to surrender. You feel the tension in his crew as they whisper and scurry following his commands, yet enjoying a sly joke at the expense of terrified merchants. Historians still argue whether his terrifying appearance was genuine cunning or just the embellishment of later storytellers, but you can imagine the adrenaline pumping in every chest aboard his ship. Life on his vessel was as theatrical as it was brutal. You trudge past hammocks, swinging gently, some worn smooth with sweat and salt, others containing pirates counting spoils or plotting a dicey move against their captain. Did you know that Blackbeard sometimes allowed his men to keep part of their loot, but only if they agreed to obey the unspoken rules of fear and loyalty? Quirky, right? Almost like a twisted motivational seminar at sea, except the consequences for failing were considerably more permanent. You wander to the edge of the deck, brushing against the rigging as the wind tugs insistently at the sails. Somewhere below, a barrel of salted pork tumbles gently, and the smell mingles with smoke from a small fire meant to prepare a simple stew. Blackbeard's habits extend to these daily rituals too. Some accounts suggest he slept with pistols at his side, surrounded by candles and a jumble of maps, charts, and possibly a stuffed exotic bird. Historians still debate whether his superstitions were common practice or personal quirks. You picture the glow of candlelight reflecting off the polished steel, imagining a man, both fearsome and meticulous, a creature of legend and a very human contradiction. Even his crew played into the spectacle. Some tied themselves to the rigging to appear ghostly from a distance. Others whispered tales of cursed cannonballs and stolen treasure hidden in nearby coves. You probably wouldn't notice these details if you were busy trying not to trip over coils of rope, but they created a theater of dread that made Blackbeard's enemies surrender without a fight. The Caribbean waters were as much a stage as a battlefield, and every pirate understood his starring role. There are lighter moments too. You hear laughter echo across the deck as a sailor tries to teach a parrot to imitate the captain's growl. Blackbeard apparently had a soft spot for animals, or at least tolerated them, though historians still argue whether such stories were embellishments to soften a fearsome image. And yet, as the wind tugs at your sleeves and the ship creaks in response, you sense a strange rhythm, a hypnotic blend of danger and delight that defines life aboard his vessel. So you trudge on, keeping one eye on the horizon and the other on the subtle theatrics around you. Smoke curls through the rigging, the faint scent of gunpowder lingering like an invisible warning. And somewhere, a lute strums an off-key tune, perhaps the prelude to a pirate ballad, perhaps a warning. You feel the pulse of history, of legend, as Blackbeard moves among his men, his gaze catching yours, in a moment that's both thrilling and unnerving. You understand now why tales of his terror endure, why his name is whispered even centuries later, and why historians continue to debate which parts of his life were crafted for legend and which were grim reality. Anne Bonny waits for you in the shadows of a low-hanging sail, her presence sharp and unpredictable, like a sudden gust off the Caribbean. You trudge closer, feeling the creak of the deck beneath your boots and the tang of salt water stinging your nostrils. She smirks, a glint of mischief in her eye, and you realize immediately that this is no ordinary pirate. Historians still argue whether her exploits were exaggerated, but the evidence that she defied every 18th century expectation for women at sea is as vivid as the sun glinting off cutlasses. You probably wouldn't survive a day in her world without nerves of steel or a very quick wit. Her life is a mix of theatrics, danger, and scandal that seems almost too good to be true. Born in Ireland, she fled an arranged marriage and found herself in the Bahamas, where the line between survival and lawlessness blurred with every swing of a rope or flash of a blade. You trudge through the rumor-strewn decks of her ship, imagining how she moved seamlessly among men, hiding her gender beneath loose clothing, a scarf, and the ever-present need for agility. Quirky anecdotes tell of her casually gambling with crew members for stolen rum, her laughter echoing through the hold as men curse their luck. You can almost hear the debates among historians. Did Anne really engage in direct combat, or were some of her deeds embellished to fit the romanticized narrative of female piracy? The answer seems to drift like mist over the Caribbean horizon, part truth, part legend. And yet, every account agrees that she was fearless. You picture her swinging from ropes, pistols at the ready, cutting a striking silhouette against the sunset as cannon smoke drifts lazily past. Daily life on her ship offers as much intrigue as the battles themselves. Food is scarce, water salty, and the deck slippery with rain or spilled grog. You feel the swaying beneath your feet and hear the chatter of sailors plotting their next heist or whispering about Anne's latest audacious stunt. Some reports claim she once leapt into a tavern brawl and fought alongside Calico Jack's crew, blending seamlessly into the chaos. Historians still argue whether the details of these confrontations are factual or merely embellished tales meant to sell newspapers and pamphlets. Yet there's humor hidden in the dangers. You watch Anne taunt a nervous sailor, whispering exaggerated threats while hiding a grin, and you imagine the inner life of this pirate woman who thrived on both fear and fascination. Did she really have a soft spot for kittens she smuggled aboard for company? Perhaps. Some accounts hint at personal quirks, like secretly sketching maps or memorizing navigational charts with meticulous care. These small details make her human amidst the legend, a reminder that pirates weren't just caricatures of evil. but complex figures navigating brutal, unpredictable lives. And you notice the camaraderie among her crew. Despite the scandals, despite the risk of hanging or being shot, loyalty is fragile but palpable. Anne's presence commands attention, respect, and sometimes quiet rebellion. Even now, as you step lightly across the deck, you sense the weight of her reputation, an aura that persists in whispers and scholarly debates centuries later. The thrill is intoxicating. The smell of sea air mingling with gunpowder, the groan of timbers, the laughter of a crew who knows their leader is as dangerous as she is captivating. By the time the sun dips fully below the horizon, you feel a strange mixture of adrenaline and reverence. Anne Bonny's life is a caution, an inspiration, and a mystery all at once. You trudge back to the rail, wind tugging at your cloak, and imagine her shadow disappearing into the night, leaving a trail of scandal, defiance, and laughter that no historian has yet fully untangled. Calico Jack, or John Rackham as he was formerly known, saunters into your imagination with a swagger that seems almost choreographed. You trudge along the deck, the wood slick under your boots from a recent drizzle, and catch sight of his brightly coloured coat, flapping in the wind like a signal flag of chaos. The nickname Calico comes from his love of flashy, patterned clothing, a preference that made him memorable, but also, historians still argue, possibly a distraction from his tactical incompetence. You probably wouldn't last long if you tried to imitate his flamboyance without understanding the danger behind the show. Romance and rebellion mingle freely in his story. Anne Bonny, whom you've just glimpsed in the previous section, famously sailed under his command. Their partnership isn't just scandalous, it's revolutionary for the time, defying the rigid gender norms and societal expectations of the Caribbean colonies. You watch as the crew whispers about the lovers' antics, from late-night plotting sessions to daring raids on merchant vessels. Did you know that some accounts suggest Calico Jack allowed his female crew members to fight alongside men, which was extraordinarily rare? Historians still argue about how often women actually took part in pirate battles versus remaining behind the scenes. But the very idea fuels your imagination. Jack's approach to piracy is less disciplined than that of Blackbeard or Bartholomew Roberts. You notice scattered crates of loot on the deck, barrels of rum rolling lazily as sailors stumble in the fading light. Unlike the meticulously organized operations of other captains, his raids often depended on audacity, luck, and the occasional bluff. Quirky accounts tell of him strumming a guitar and singing bawdy songs while a skirmish unfolded nearby. A distraction, a morale booster, or sheer madness. The scholars still debate whether his antics were tactical or just theatrics meant to charm or terrify. Life aboard his ship is a mixture of humor, chaos, and danger. You catch glimpses of pirates playing dice for rum, exchanging stories of narrow escapes, or teasing newcomers who misstep along the slick deck. Even routine chores carry peril. The rigging groans under the wind. The gunpowder is ever present and dangerously close to flames. And the smell of sweat, sea brine, and tobacco clings to everyone. Calico Jack himself seems to glide through this disorder with a smirk, the embodiment of carefree scandal, yet you sense that luck is his only true companion. And then there's the tale of his downfall. You hear whispers of a sudden naval attack led by Captain Jonathan Barnett, a reminder that flamboyance alone cannot save a pirate from the law. Some stories say Jack was captured while lying in his cabin, an ironic twist for a man so accustomed to drama on deck. Historians still argue whether his capture was due to negligence, betrayal, or simply being outmaneuvered. But the lesson remains vivid. Daring and style can't always outpace reality. Amid the danger, humor persists. You imagine him trying to impress a crew with a juggling trick using pistols, or decorating the ship with calico fabrics to confuse approaching enemies. These bizarre flourishes make you grin as you navigate the ship's maze-like layout. And in the quieter moments, the wind carrying the scent of the sea. You can almost hear the whispered gossip of Caribbean townsfolk who swore they'd never forget the flamboyant pirate who laughed at danger, flirted with scandal, and left behind a legacy as colorful as his wardrobe. By the time the sun dips behind the horizon, the last flickers of his audacious escapades linger in your mind. Calico Jack may not have amassed the wealth of other pirates, nor inspired fear to the degree of Blackbeard, but his scandals, romances, and style-infused piracy ensure that he remains unforgettable in history and legend alike. You trudge to the rail, imagining the glint of calico in torchlight and the laughter echoing over waves that have long since carried him into the realm of myth. Bartholomew Roberts, known to many as Black Bart, looms next in your journey, a figure whose reputation for flamboyance is matched only by his astonishing success. You trudge along the deck, the salty breeze tangling your hair, and feel the weight of his legend pressing in, as if the very planks remember the thousands of ships he raided. Historians still argue whether his skill alone made him so feared, or if sheer audacity sealed his reputation. But either way, you probably wouldn't want to cross paths with him in open waters. Roberts's career is staggering. Over a 4-year span, he captured more than 400 ships. Each heist a mixture of careful planning, luck, and occasional improvisation. The ship's deck, in your imagination, brims with barrels of stolen goods, crates of exotic spices, and gold coins spilling like autumn leaves across weathered wood. Quirky accounts tell of him taking exotic pets aboard, parrots and monkeys for companionship, or perhaps just for amusement, adding a surreal layer to the otherwise grim business of piracy. These small touches make you pause and imagine a pirate who, for all his ruthlessness, appreciated the oddities of life. You wander past the rigging, brushing your hands along ropes that hum under tension, and consider his strict yet peculiar code of conduct. He enforced rules against theft within the crew and dictated shares of loot with meticulous care. Violations could result in punishment, yet there was humor woven into the discipline. Some accounts suggest minor offenses were punished with tasks so absurd that the crew laughed even as they obeyed. Historians still debate the exact wording of his code, yet its spirit of order amidst chaos is undeniable. The superstitions of his crew add flavor to daily life. You probably wouldn't survive long without respecting their strange rituals, from touching the sails in a clockwise circle for good fortune to avoiding walking under certain shadows cast by the masts. Roberts himself reportedly carried a Bible in one hand and a pistol in the other, embodying contradictions that made him fascinating and terrifying. Scholars still argue whether these rituals were widespread among pirates or idiosyncrasies of Black Bart's command, but the stories persist. Even the loot itself is scandalous. Roberts favored wealthy for merchant ships, but he had an eye for whimsy too. One tale claims he stole barrels of fine wine, not just for drinking, but to barter in far-flung ports for jewelry fabrics, or curiosities. You trudge through this imagined chaos, the scent of spilled rum and damp wood mingling in the air, as pirates chatter about their next adventure or debate which townsfolk dared challenge them last. The camaraderie is palpable, a delicate balance of fear, respect, and shared ambition. Yet there are moments of levity. You can almost see Roberts inspecting a parrot, muttering about its squawk, resembling a rival captain's insults, or joking with his men as they untangle rigging in the fading sun. Historians still argue whether Roberts's charm and leadership were exaggerated by tales meant to make him appear larger than life, but whether myth or reality, you feel the pulse of his audacious exploits coursing through the ship. As night approaches, you lean against the rail and watch imagined lanterns swing, casting playful shadows on the deck. You sense the delicate dance of discipline, superstition, and theatricality that allowed Blackbeard to thrive where others failed. In this moment, his legend is tangible. A pirate who combined strategy with spectacle, cruelty with humor, and an uncanny ability to capture not just ships, but the imagination of future generations. You trudge back along the deck, feeling the hum of history beneath your feet, and imagine Roberts's laughter echoing over the Caribbean waves long after his final voyage. Mary Read's story slips into your awareness like a shadow, quiet but undeniably present. You trudge along the deck, feeling the wood creak beneath your boots and smelling the faint tang of the sea, mingled with the sharp scent of gunpowder. Her life is a tangled web of disguises, deception, and audacity that allowed her to fight alongside Anne Bonny under Calico Jack's command. You probably wouldn't survive a day in her world without nerves as strong as steel and a mind quick enough to navigate shifting alliances and suspicion. Historians still argue about the frequency of women openly participating in pirate combat, but Mary's legend endures as proof that some dared and thrived. Born in England, Mary spent much of her early life disguised as a boy, a pattern that continued into her piracy. You can almost see her, chest strapped and sleeves rolled, blending seamlessly into the male-dominated environment of the Caribbean pirate cruise. Quirky anecdotes hint that she sometimes sang or recited poetry to maintain the ruse or amuse her shipmates, a playful counterpoint to the deadly seriousness of their raids. The crew tolerated or even admired these quirks because they understood that cleverness often outweighed brute strength. You feel the tension in her daily life. The constant threat of exposure lurks like a shadow, and every glance from a suspicious sailor could spell disaster. And yet, Mary Read thrives. You trudge past hammocks and barrels, sensing a subtle rhythm in the chaos, the shuffle of boots, the creak of ropes, the occasional clink of coins or cutlasses. Each sound, each smell, reinforces the precarious balance she maintains between survival and scandal. Some historians still argue whether her effectiveness in combat was exceptional or exaggerated by later storytellers, but the stories of her bravery and cunning persist, vivid and compelling. Her battles are a mix of skill and improvisation. Imagine her leaping from a rope onto a merchant ship, pistols flashing, sword in hand, as surprised sailors scramble in confusion. The thrill is palpable, even from your imagined perch, and you catch glimpses of her humor, mocking an opponent's clumsiness mid-fight, or exchanging wry glances with Anne Bonny that hint at both camaraderie and unspoken codes of loyalty. Life aboard the ship demands constant vigilance, but Mary seems to navigate it effortlessly a living example of courage under pressure. Even mundane tasks take on intrigue. You watch her hoist sails, handle ropes, and tend to the wounded, all while maintaining her secret identity. Quirky stories suggest she had a particular knack for knots, which not only impressed her crew, but also occasionally saved them from disaster. Historians still debate whether these anecdotes are factual or romanticized, yet they add depth to the legend of a pirate who defied expectations at every turn. And there's a subtle humor beneath the danger. You imagine her teaching a sailor how to tie an intricate knot while whispering a sarcastic comment about his clumsiness, or smuggling small trinkets as rewards for loyalty. Her life is a delicate dance of secrecy and skill, risk and reward. You sense the thrill of the unknown in every step, the constant tension that shapes every decision, every glance, every swing of a sword. By the time night blankets the ship, you feel the weight of her legacy, an extraordinary woman who carved her place in a violent, chaotic world, leaving behind stories that continue to challenge perceptions and spark debates among historians. You trudge to the rail, imagining her shadow moving deftly across the deck, and realize that Mary Read's courage and cunning ensure her place among the most scandalous and compelling figures in pirate history. Blackbeard's unusual plunders greet you next, their eccentricity as vivid as the Caribbean sun, reflecting off the waves. You trudge across the deck, the wood slick and salty beneath your boots, and imagine barrels rolling lazily past your feet, some filled with gold coins, others with stolen rum, and even a few rumored to contain exotic pets. His taste for the bizarre makes him stand out among pirates, and historians still argue over whether his moral code was strict, arbitrary, or simply performative. You probably wouldn't survive long, trying to guess his next move without learning to anticipate both genius and whimsy. Roberts's raids are astonishing in both scale and creativity. Beyond the sheer volume of ships he captured, over 400 in just 4 years, he had a flair for targeting unusual cargo. Some records suggest he once liberated a cargo of live parrots and monkeys, which he may have kept aboard as companions or as psychological toys for his crew. You trudge past crates, imagining the chatter and occasional squawk echoing across the deck, blending with the slap of waves and the occasional creak of rigging. Quirky, right? Almost like a floating menagerie, run by a pirate with a sense of humor. His crew operates under a code that is both strict and oddly meticulous. You feel the tension in the air as sailors hustle to balance the line between discipline and indulgence. Violating the code could result in punishment, ranging from extra chores to marooning on a deserted isle. But there were also allowances for amusement, like small bets on whether a parrot could outsquawk a rival captain's insults. Historians still debate how rigid or flexible Roberts' code actually was, but the stories make you smile as you trudge along the sun-warmed deck, imagining the mix of fear and laughter that permeated every corner. The pursuit of treasure under Roberts's command also had its share of scandal. Beyond rum and exotic pets, he seized valuable cargo ranging from fine silks to rare spices, often trading or bartering for further luxuries. You probably wouldn't realize how theatrical some of these heists were. Pirates would sometimes stage minor deceptions, floating empty crates in sight to distract pursuing ships, while the real loot vanished below deck. Scholars still argue over whether some of these ploys were common tactics or just embellished tales. but the suspense lingers in your imagination. And then there's the superstition. Roberts's men often carried charms or observed rituals designed to protect against curses or bad luck. Some sailors believed certain barrels or boxes were haunted or carried misfortune, and Blackbeard himself reportedly had a strange attachment to particular items, treating them as talismans. Historians still debate whether these superstitions were widespread among pirates or personal eccentricities of Roberts, but they add colour to the everyday life aboard the ship. Despite the danger and discipline, humour persists. You can imagine Roberts laughing as a parrot steals a coin, or as sailors compete to see who can climb the rigging fastest while balancing a barrel of rum. These small moments of levity contrast sharply with the terror he inspired in merchant crews and navies alike, creating a rhythm of tension and release that defines the pirate experience. You trudge toward the rail, feeling the sun warm your shoulders, and imagine the countless stories of cunning raids, bizarre loot, and theatrical antics that ensure Blackbeard's name remains one of the most scandalous and intriguing in pirate history. You drift next into the notorious pirate havens of Nassau and Tortuga, the air thick with salt, rum, and scandal. You trudge along the narrow, uneven streets of Nassau, wooden planks creaking underfoot as merchants, sailors, and the occasional scoundrel hustle past. The scent of frying fish mingles with gunpowder residue, and somewhere in the distance, a lute strums a tune that doesn't quite match the chaotic scene. These havens were more than ports. They were microcosms of lawlessness, corruption, and audacious living. Historians still dissect the extent to which these towns operated as fully-fledged pirate republics, or merely tolerated lawlessness for pragmatic trade. You probably wouldn't last a night here without keen eyes and quicker wits. In Nassau, the infamous Pirates' Republic thrived. Governors were bribed, taverns doubled as secret planning rooms, and the occasional duel broke out in the streets. You trudge past sailors nursing grog, trading stolen silks, and whispering secrets that might get someone marooned or worse. Quirky stories abound. One tavern supposedly had a resident alligator used to intimidate unruly patrons, and some pirates claimed it was a good luck charm. Scholars still argue whether these oddities were factual or tall tales, but they certainly make you grin at the thought of a scaly guardian in the corner of a smoky bar. Tortuga, meanwhile, was a different kind of chaos. The scent of salted meat and gunpowder mixes with exotic spices from passing ships, creating an intoxicating haze. You notice shady figures negotiating, laughter echoing as dice clatter across uneven tables. Pirates mingled freely with smugglers and opportunists, often forming alliances that were as temporary as the tides. Historians still debate the exact nature of governance, or lack thereof, here, but the enduring image is of a floating society built on cunning, camaraderie, and carefully balanced risk. Corruption was omnipresent. You trudge past port officials who wink and accept bribes, allowing ships to dock and pirates to offload loot with minimal interference. Some accounts suggest pirate leaders even held informal courts to adjudicate disputes, settle mutinies, and maintain a bizarre order amid disorder. Quirky anecdotes speak of pirates bribing priests to marry them in secrecy or engaging in mock trials for fun. Scholars still argue about the authenticity of these tales, but they add a playful, humanizing dimension to otherwise dangerous lives. Daily life in these havens was equal parts indulgence and survival. You notice merchants trying to hawk goods, while wary eyes track every stranger. The taverns are full of laughter and scuffles, music and arguments. Historians still debate whether the seemingly endless revelry masked deep fears of capture or whether pirates genuinely embraced hedonism without concern. You probably wouldn't survive long without understanding this delicate balance of thrill and threat. Even the smallest details carry scandalous undertones. Pirates' clothing, often stolen or flamboyantly embroidered, was a statement of identity. Tattoos, rings, and trinkets told stories of victories, defeats, and personal quirks. Quirky rituals like marking each successful raid on the ship's mast mixed superstition with pride. Historians still argue over how standardized these customs truly were, but the visual is irresistible, a deck filled with color, noise, and life that thrums with mischief. As the sun dips below the horizon, you pause at the edge of the quay, feeling the lapping waves and listening to distant shouts of sailors and merchants alike. The pirate havens, with their mix of corruption, camaraderie, and constant intrigue, set the stage for scandals that would ripple far beyond their shores. You trudge back along the boardwalk, imagining secret meetings, hidden treasures, and whispered plots that historians continue to untangle centuries later. Mutinies and betrayals ripple through the world of pirates like an undercurrent, subtle yet dangerous, and you feel their presence as you trudge across the slick deck. Every creak of timber, every whisper of canvas carries potential treachery. You probably wouldn't survive long without paying attention to the eyes around you. The glint of ambition, the flicker of resentment, the subtle signs that loyalty is as fragile as a rope under strain. Historians still argue how common mutinies truly were, yet the stories that survive paint a vivid picture of tension, paranoia, and the occasional brilliantly executed coup aboard these lawless ships. You step past a cluster of sailors whispering near a coil of rope, their words hushed, but carrying the weight of secrets that could alter lives or end them. The threat of betrayal isn't theoretical. It lurks in the very structure of pirate society. Pirate crews often operated under quasi-democratic systems, electing captains and voting on major decisions. Yet this very freedom created an environment where ambition could flourish unchecked. You trudge along the deck, imagining a sudden dispute over loot or command. The tension so thick you could slice it with a cutlass. Quirky anecdotes suggest that some mutinies began over seemingly trivial disagreements, insulted pride, a stolen meal, or even a miscounted coin. Historians still debate whether these minor spark events were commonplace or exaggerated, but either way, they underscore the constant volatility aboard pirate ships. The psychology of betrayal among pirates is fascinating. Imagine a lieutenant plotting against a captain, slowly gaining support from the crew, whispering promises of gold and freedom in exchange for loyalty. You can almost feel the slow, deliberate steps of a plot unfolding. The quiet calculations, the small acts of sabotage designed to destabilize leadership. Some mutinies were brief and chaotic, collapsing within hours. Others succeeded spectacularly, leaving new leaders in control, but inevitably sowing further discord. Historians still argue about the precise mechanisms and frequency of these events, but the human drama remains undeniable. Daily routines became fraught with suspicion. You trudge past barrels of provisions, knowing that each theft or mismanaged ration could be interpreted as a prelude to revolt. Sailors watched one another constantly, not only for discipline, but for signs of disloyalty. Some legends tell of secret signals, a scratch on the mast, a particular arrangement of sails that indicated conspiratorial meetings in progress. Quirky, yes, but also a reminder of the extraordinary measures pirates took to survive and maintain control. You probably wouldn't survive a week without learning to read the unspoken language of suspicion. Betrayal didn't always come from within. Sometimes pirates double-crossed former allies, merchants, or other captains who had been considered friends. You trudge past imagined alliances dissolving in the salty air, the laughter of sailors turning to sharp whispers as schemes unravel. Some accounts suggest pirates feigned friendship or business partnerships to gain access to cargo, only to attack once the ships were vulnerable. Historians still debate whether these acts were exceptional or a standard part of pirate cunning, but the tension they create is palpable, even now in your imagination. Quirky stories of mutiny illustrate the unpredictability of life at sea. One tale tells of a pirate convinced his ship's cook was conspiring against him and placing secret poisons in the food. The cook, aware of the suspicion, reportedly played along, feeding the captain harmless yet suspicious-tasting dishes until the panic subsided. Historians still argue whether this is embellished folklore or a kernel of truth, but it highlights the mix of paranoia and humor that could permeate pirate life. You trudge past the galley, imagining the clatter of pots, the simmer of stew, and the watchful eyes of a crew ready to turn on one another at the slightest hint of treachery. Mutinies also intersected with loyalty in curious ways. Some captains who inspired genuine respect managed to suppress rebellion through charisma and fairness, while others faced repeated insurrections despite clever planning. Imagine the delicate balance, a captain distributing loot equitably, yet keeping a firm hand, his crew oscillating between gratitude and ambition. Historians still argue whether this mix of democracy and autocracy was a feature of pirate culture or simply the whim of legendary captains. Either way, it adds layers to the story of life at sea. As night falls, you feel the tension in the air sharpen, shadows stretching across the deck as sailors whisper under their breaths. The scent of damp wood and salty air mingles with the faint aroma of gunpowder, creating a heady atmosphere where every sound, footsteps, creaking ropes, distant laughter, might signal a plot in motion. You trudge along, imagining secret meetings in dark corners, loyalists swearing oaths, and conspirators exchanging coded signals. Each step reminds you that trust aboard a pirate ship was a precious commodity, constantly tested by greed, ambition, and the ever-present risk of death. The Caribbean skies darken as you trudge along the deck, the wind tugging insistently at your clothes, carrying whispers of hidden treasures and treacherous waters. You can feel the pull of the sea beneath your boots, each sway of the ship a subtle reminder that danger is never far and scandal is always close. Pirates weren't just swashbucklers, they were masters of theater, deception, and audacity, living lives that blurred the line between brilliance and madness. Historians still argue whether some of these stories were exaggerated to entertain or propaganda to demonize them, but the thrill you feel is real, immediate, and inescapable. Edward Lowe drifts into your consciousness next, a figure infamous for both cunning and cruelty. You trudge past barrels of stolen cargo, the faint smell of spoiled rum mixing with the salty tang of the ocean. Lowe's reputation for unpredictable violence precedes him, yet his operations were strangely disciplined. Some accounts suggest he could charm entire crews with wit and audacity, only to unleash brutality in moments of perceived betrayal. Quirky stories hint at bizarre eccentricities, like decorating captured ships with the spoils of previous conquests, but historians still argue whether these were actual practices or tales, fabricated to make him seem more terrifying than he already was. You probably wouldn't want to test his temper firsthand. The lives of Lowe's crew were a constant dance between fear and exhilaration. You feel the tension in the air, the quiet glances of men measuring risk and reward in every decision. Theft, sabotage, and ambush were not just tools, they were necessities. Some sailors reportedly played cruel pranks on one another, yet beneath the dark humor lay an unspoken code. Survival demanded loyalty, cunning, and occasionally ruthless calculation. Historians still debate how much of Lowe's notoriety came from genuine records versus embellished storytelling. But the legends persist vividly. Navigation and strategy under Lowe were equally scandalous. You trudge past maps strewn across the deck, charts marked with coded symbols, and spyglasses trained toward merchant fleets. Some tales claim he deliberately spread false rumors to confuse his enemies, leaving empty barrels in harbors or planting misleading signals along coastlines. Quirky, yes, but effective. The scholars still argue whether such tactics were standard pirate procedure or anomalies unique to Lowe, yet imagining them gives you a glimpse of the cunning intelligence beneath his ferocious reputation. Daily routines aboard his ship are steeped in both superstition and spectacle. Sailors might draw lots for mundane tasks, wear talismans for protection, or whisper incantations before boarding a target vessel. You probably wouldn't survive a week without respecting these odd rituals, which combined practicality with psychological warfare. Some reports suggest Lowe encouraged bizarre competitions among his crew, from sword duels to riddle contests to maintain morale and obedience. Historians still debate how widespread such practices were, but the humor and danger intertwine seamlessly, creating a rhythm unique to pirate life. Amid the tension, glimpses of humanity emerge. You imagine Lowe laughing at a clever prank, sharing a stolen meal with a loyal mate, or quietly watching the horizon, contemplating the next audacious raid. Quirky tales of him conversing with captured animals or insisting on certain ceremonial practices add layers to his character, suggesting that even the most feared pirates had eccentricities that humanized them. Historians still argue about the veracity of these stories, but they give you something to smile at as you trudge along the swaying deck. Lowe's scandals extend beyond his raids. You feel the whispered rumors of treachery in Caribbean taverns, the tales of merchants betrayed after being promised safe passage, and the legend of entire crews disappearing without trace. Some stories describe grotesque punishments, others improbable escapes. Historians still debate which accounts are factual, exaggerated, or pure myth, yet you can almost feel the pulse of history in every detail. The creak of the ship, the slap of waves, the faint smell of gunpowder. As night falls, the Caribbean sky, streaked with stars, you feel the full spectrum of life under Edward Lowe's command. Fear, cunning, humor, and scandal. You trudge to the rail, letting the cool wind wash over your face, and imagine the waves carrying his legend far beyond the reaches of any single pirate ship. Each whispered story, each debated anecdote, keeps him alive in the collective imagination, a reminder that in the world of piracy, notoriety and scandal are as much a currency as gold and rum. Samuel Bellamy, known to many as Black Sam, drifts into your imagination like a shadowy storm on the horizon. You trudge along the slick deck, your boots clattering softly against the wood as the wind tugs at your cloak, carrying the salty scent of the sea and a hint of gunpowder. He was both charming and daring, a young pirate whose rise to infamy seemed almost fated, yet his story is threaded with scandal, love, and the relentless unpredictability of the ocean. Historians still argue whether his romanticized image as a gentleman pirate is entirely accurate or largely myth, but you probably wouldn't survive a week under his command without nerves of steel and a mind ready for the ever-shifting rules of pirate life. Bellamy's ascent to notoriety begins in the waters off the New England coast. You can almost see him aboard his ship, the Wider, a sleek, fast vessel capable of outmaneuvering naval ships and merchantmen alike. Quirky anecdotes suggest he had an unusual penchant for luxury items, fine linens, silverware, and even rare wines, which he seized not merely for profit, but to cultivate a certain elegance among his crew. Historians still debate whether these preferences reflect personal taste or clever strategy, using allure and prestige to inspire loyalty among men accustomed to hardship and violence. Life aboard the Wider is a mixture of camaraderie, risk, and meticulous planning. You trudge past sailors, balancing barrels of loot, their eyes alert to both the horizon and the whispers of potential betrayal. Pirates had to remain ever vigilant, because one misstep could lead to mutiny, capture, or death. Yet within this tension, humor and eccentricity flourish. Bellamy reportedly encouraged storytelling and songs during long voyages, using music and wit to maintain morale and distract from the constant danger. Scholars still debate how much of these stories were embellished by chroniclers, but imagining the laughter and camaraderie amid stormy seas creates a vivid, human picture of pirate life. Romance is central to Bellamy's legend. You probably won't survive a day without noting how intertwined his personal life was with scandal. He famously fell in love with a young woman named Maria Hallett, a tale so enduring that local legends still claim to see her ghost waiting by the shore for his return. Some historians argue the story was exaggerated to dramatize Bellamy's persona, transforming him into a pirate captain turned tragic romantic figure. Yet whether entirely factual or not, this narrative adds a layer of tenderness to a life otherwise defined by plunder and danger. You trudge along, imagining clandestine exchanges of letters, stolen kisses in moonlit coves, and fleeting moments of intimacy that seemed almost absurd against the backdrop of violent piracy. The Widar's raids were remarkable for both scale and precision. Bellamy preferred speed, surprise, and decisiveness, often capturing vessels without firing a shot. You trudge past imagined masts creaking under the wind, the smell of salt and tar mingling with the faint aroma of captured cargo, sacks of sugar, spices, and coins gleaming like sunlight on the waves. Quirky tales suggest he sometimes allowed merchant crews to retain small luxuries or even food as a gesture of goodwill, a tactic historians still debate. Was it genuine mercy, strategic manipulation, or a romanticized embellishment to balance his more ruthless acts? His leadership style was extraordinary. Bellamy reportedly cultivated loyalty through fairness, democratic decision-making, and personal charisma. Sailors elected him captain after demonstrating skill and judgment, not merely force or intimidation. You trudge across the deck, imagining voting sessions among the crew, debates over target ships, and occasional arguments resolved with humour, sharp wit, or daring gambits. Historians still argue about how structured or spontaneous these democratic practices were, but the concept itself highlights a fascinating paradox. In a world defined by lawlessness, order and consensus often proved crucial for survival. Pirate life under Bellamy was punctuated by superstition and ritual. You notice sailors consulting stars for navigation, carrying charms for protection, and whispering incantations before boarding enemy ships. Some accounts describe him performing elaborate ceremonies to honor victories, while others suggest he used superstition to manipulate fear and loyalty among his crew. Quirky yet practical, these behaviors exemplify the strange blend of logic, belief, and theater that define the pirate experience. Scholars still debate the prevalence and purpose of such rituals, but imagining them brings the daily rhythm of life aboard the Wider into sharp focus. Danger is omnipresent. You trudge past barrels of gunpowder, ropes ready for boarding maneuvers, and the occasional pile of loot signaling a successful raid. Each movement carries risk. A misstep could crush a foot, snap a rope, or spark an unintended fire. Bellamy's crew learned to balance caution with audacity, timing raids precisely, and trusting in their captain's intuition. Historians still argue whether some of his most famous exploits, like capturing the Fidelia or intercepting a treasure-laden French vessel, were precisely executed or later dramatized, but the tension, courage, and cunning required are palpable even in imagined retellings. Scandal often accompanied Bellamy's victories. Tales recount sailors arguing over shares of loot, whispers of clandestine romances, and disputes that nearly escalated into mutiny. You trudge along the deck, sensing the delicate negotiation of power, desire, and ambition that governs life aboard a pirate ship. Some anecdotes suggest that captured women were integrated into the crew in unusual ways, occasionally as apprentices or assistants, a practice historians still debate. Such rumors highlight the constant intermingling of scandal, survival, and social fluidity in pirate society. Bellamy's downfall is as dramatic as his rise. You trudge past the imagined waves that would one day swallow the Wider off the coast of Cape Cod in a violent storm, claiming the lives of most of its crew. The wind howls, the sails strain, and you feel the relentless power of nature, indifferent to fame or skill. Quirky stories recount his crew attempting desperate measures to save the ship, throwing barrels overboard or attempting to navigate treacherous shallows, yet the storm proved unstoppable. Historians still argue about precise details of the wreck, from the exact route to the distribution of survivors, but the narrative of sudden, tragic loss endures. Even after death, Bellamy's legend thrives. Artifacts recovered from the Wider, coins and shipwreck remnants allow historians to reconstruct aspects of his voyages, yet countless stories remain tantalizingly incomplete. You trudge along, imagining a ghostly presence, the echo of commands and laughter mingling with the crash of waves, a reminder that pirates' lives were a complex weave of heroism, scandal, and sheer unpredictability. Quirky posthumous tales suggest sightings of Bellamy's ghost on foggy nights, a romanticized echo of the man who once captured ships, hearts, and imaginations alike. Bellamy's story blends romance, audacity, and scandal into a tapestry that continues to inspire fascination. You trudge back to the rail, wind tangling your hair, and feel the weight of his choices, victories, and losses. His life exemplifies the paradoxical nature of piracy, a mixture of elegance and brutality, cunning and luck, loyalty and betrayal. Historians still argue about the full extent of his character and deeds, yet every detail you've imagined, the laughter, the raids, the whispered romances, remains alive in the collective memory of piracy. By the time the stars pierce the velvet night sky, you feel the rhythm of the ocean beneath you, the hum of creaking timbers, and the constant presence of both danger and charm in Samuel Bellamy's world. You trudge once more along the deck, aware that every whispered scandal, every daring maneuver, and every stolen treasure contributes to a legacy that continues to captivate centuries later. In this moment, Black Sam is both a man and myth, a pirate whose life and legend remind you that history is often stranger, riskier, and far more romantic than it seems. You feel the salt-laden wind push against your face as the story shifts to Charles Vane, a pirate whose reputation is built on defiance, cruelty, and sheer unpredictability. You trudge along the deck, feeling the sway of the ship beneath your boots, imagining the creak of timbers and the distant slap of waves against the hull. Vane is notorious not merely for his raids, but for his unwillingness to compromise, a pirate who refused to back down even when faced with superior forces. Historians still argue whether his ferocity was reckless or calculated, but you probably wouldn't survive a single engagement under his command without nerves of steel and lightning-fast reflexes. Vane's career is a mix of brilliant strategy and infuriating stubbornness. You trudge past barrels of rum, crates of stolen goods and coiled ropes, imagining his crew moving with precision under his sharp gaze. He preferred speed and audacity in attacks, often choosing vulnerable merchant ships over heavily armed vessels. But when confronted, he could fight with a ferocity that left opponents stunned. Quirky tales describe him wearing a flamboyant red coat during battles, not for fashion, but as a psychological tactic to unsettle enemies. Scholars still debate how much of his flamboyance was deliberate showmanship versus embellishment, but the image endures vividly in your imagination. Life aboard Vane's ships is a delicate balance of fear, respect, and calculated risk. You probably wouldn't survive a week without understanding the hierarchy, the codes, and the subtle cues that signal loyalty or insubordination. Some sailors admired him for his fearlessness, others dreaded his temper. Quirky stories suggest he sometimes challenged even seasoned crew members to duels for minor slights. Yet oddly, these duels often strengthened loyalty rather than creating division. Historians still argue over whether these were common practices or legendary exaggerations, but they add depth to your imagined stroll along the deck. Vane's raids were as much psychological as they were physical. You trudge past the imagined horizon, envisioning the strategic placement of decoy ships, the timing of cannon fire, and the use of darkness and fog to confuse and terrify opponents. Some accounts suggest he would even leave behind empty chests to lure pursuers into traps, an early form of cunning misdirection. Historians still debate the prevalence of such tactics, but you can almost feel the tension and anticipation in every maneuver. Corruption and cunning intertwine in his story. You notice whispered rumors among the crew about bribes, secret alliances, and covert deals with port authorities. Vane's life demonstrates that piracy was not just about violence, but also negotiation, manipulation, and the art of survival. Quirky tales tell of him feigning cowardice to trick adversaries into underestimating him, a tactic that historians still argue about. Yet, it perfectly illustrates the interplay between showmanship and strategy in pirate life. Daily routines aboard Vane's ship are filled with ritual, superstition, and small absurdities. Sailors consult the stars, carry protective charms, and adhere to obscure rules that regulate both work and leisure. You trudge past hammocks, swinging gently in the wind, imagining Vane inspecting each corner of the ship with meticulous attention, ensuring discipline while leaving room for minor amusements. Some accounts suggest he encouraged storytelling competitions to lighten tense moments, a quirky counterbalance to the otherwise brutal atmosphere. Historians still debate how structured these practices truly were, but they underscore the human dimension of pirate life. Vane's scandals often involve his confrontations with authority. You trudge along imagining tense negotiations with colonial governors, naval officers, or rival pirates. Some anecdotes describe him refusing pardon offers outright, preferring freedom and danger over safety and legality. Scholars still argue whether this defiance was principled or reckless, but it adds a rebellious thrill to his legend that you feel even as you trudge through imagined scenes of plotting and pursuit. Amid this chaos, humor and human quirks persist. You probably wouldn't survive without noticing the subtle jokes, pranks, and playful rivalry among his crew. Quirky stories recount sailors hiding small treasures from each other, engaging in mock trials, or even dressing captured animals as jesting symbols of their raids. Historians still debate whether such tales are factual or folklore, yet they paint a vivid picture of life, where danger and amusement coexist. As night descends, you feel the tension and exhilaration that define Charles Vane's world. The deck sways beneath you, the wind whispers across the rigging, and the shadows hint at plots, rivalries, and daring feats yet to come. You trudge to the rail, imagining the thrill of pursuit, the clatter of cannon fire in the distance, and the intoxicating mixture of fear and fascination that keeps both crew and historian captivated. Every whispered scandal, audacious raid, and quirky anecdote contributes to a legacy that is as thrilling as it is terrifying. Vane's life reminds you that pirate history is never simple. Fear, cunning, humor, loyalty, and rebellion intertwine, creating a tapestry that continues to captivate the imagination centuries later. You trudge one last time along the deck for this imagined night, feeling the spray of salt water, the sway of the ship, and the lingering echo of a pirate who refused to bow to convention, leaving a trail of scandal and legend in his wake. Edward Ned, Teach, better known as Blackbeard, looms large in your imagination, and you trudge along the creaking deck, feeling the weight of his legend pressing like the humid Caribbean air. The smell of tar, gunpowder, and salt stings your nose as you imagine the flickering torches lighting the ship at night. Blackbeard is the embodiment of fear, cunning, and scandal. A pirate who orchestrated terror as meticulously as he seized treasure. You probably wouldn't survive a single encounter with him unless you could balance awe, fear, and swift compliance. Historians still argue whether he was truly as bloodthirsty as claimed, or whether much of his brutality was amplified by colonial propaganda. But his reputation remains indisputably legendary. Teach's signature move, weaving slow-burning fuses into his beard to create a terrifying visage, is as theatrical as it is strategic. You can almost see him leaning over the rail, eyes gleaming, smoke curling around his face as he intimidates rival captains into surrender. Quirky tales suggest he sometimes carried multiple pistols tucked into his sash, ready to draw them simultaneously in a dramatic display. Scholars still debate how often he actually used such theatrics in combat versus whether these were embellished anecdotes. But the mental image is unforgettable and perfectly suited to the aura of fear he cultivated. Life aboard Blackbeard's flagship, the Queen Anne's Revenge, is a study in paradox. You trudge past hammocks swinging gently in the breeze and barrels stacked haphazardly across the deck. The crew operates under strict rules, yet chaos is never far away. Blackbeard's ability to combine discipline with psychological warfare ensured obedience and effectiveness. Some quirky stories claim he forced his captives to walk the plank while drinking rum in defiance, a mix of terror and theatre designed to cement his legend. Historians still debate the extent and regularity of these practices, yet they contribute to the fearsome reputation that persists centuries later. The raids themselves are a mix of brilliance and audacity. You trudge past the imagined shoreline, the glint of gold and silver catching your eye as Blackbeard orchestrates attacks on merchant ships. He often preferred surprise, intimidation, and cunning over prolonged battle, minimizing risk while maximizing gain. Quirky anecdotes suggest he sometimes left decoy ships behind to lure pursuers into ambushes, a tactic that historians still argue about regarding frequency and effectiveness. You feel the thrill of strategy in the air, the tension and anticipation woven into every moment of a raid. Scandal extends beyond combat. Teach's personal life, though less documented, was filled with rumor. You trudge along, imagining whispered stories of alliances with corrupt colonial officials, secret stashes of treasure, and romantic entanglements that scandalized communities along the coast. Some accounts claim he maintained multiple households in port towns, a detail historians still debate as factual or exaggerated. Yet it adds human complexity to the otherwise fearsome image of the pirate. Superstition and ritual are constant companions. You probably wouldn't survive without respecting the omens, charms, and coded behaviors that Blackbeard and his crew adhered to. Sailors reportedly consulted stars, carried protective talismans, and observed seemingly bizarre rituals before boarding enemy ships. Some anecdotes suggest Blackbeard personally oversaw these customs, blending practical navigation with psychological manipulation. Scholars still argue over the purpose and prevalence of such practices, but imagining them adds depth and texture to life aboard the ship. Blackbeard's showmanship extends to negotiation and intimidation. You trudge past imagined captains surrendering ships without a fight. The sound of creaking timbers and clanking chains punctuating their fear. His threats were as effective as his pistols, and he understood that a reputation for ruthlessness could achieve what brute force sometimes could not. Quirky stories describe him staging small executions to reinforce obedience, a psychological tactic historians still debate. You can almost feel the tension vibrating through the air as crew and prisoners alike navigate the delicate balance of fear, respect, and survival. Daily life remains punctuated by the absurd and unpredictable. You trudge past barrels of rum, coiled ropes, and lanterns swinging in the evening breeze. Sailors' routines are regimented but punctuated by pranks, superstitions, and bursts of humor, such as dressing captured animals in mock uniforms or staging playful bets over minor misfortunes. Historians still argue how widespread such antics were, yet they provide a glimpse of the human capacity to find levity amid constant danger. Blackbeard's final scandal is legendary, the Battle off Ocracoke Inlet. You trudge along as cannon fire shakes the deck, splintering wood beneath your feet, smoke filling the air. The chaos is palpable, yet even in death, his persona dominates. Some accounts claim he fought with 5 pistols and multiple swords, a man seemingly impervious to fear. Historians still argue about the exact details of the battle and the number of wounds he sustained, but the narrative is clear. Blackbeard faced death with theatrical audacity, cementing his place in the annals of pirate lore. Even after the battle, his legend endures. You trudge to the rail, feeling the waves crash beneath the imagined ship, hearing the faint echoes of cannon fire and shouted commands. Artifacts recovered from his shipwreck, tales passed down through generations, and popular culture ensure that his persona, both terrifying and fascinating, continues to captivate imaginations. Quirky posthumous legends suggest sightings of Blackbeard's ghostly figure on foggy nights, a spectral continuation of a life that blended terror, cunning, and spectacle. By the time the Caribbean night blankets the horizon, you sense the layered complexity of Blackbeard's world. Fear and humor, strategy and chaos, scandal and legend. You trudge back along the deck, wind whipping your hair, and feel the echo of every raid, whispered rumor, and strategic maneuver. Blackbeard remains a reminder that piracy is more than plunder. It's a performance, a calculated blend of audacity, cunning, and the enduring allure of scandal. Anne Bonny drifts into your imagination like a tempest, her presence both alluring and dangerous as you trudge across the swaying deck, the creak of timber underfoot harmonizing with the sighing wind. The air is thick with the scent of salt, tar, and faint smoke from distant cannon fire. Bonny defied expectations and gender norms alike, carving her name into pirate history through audacity, cunning, and a series of scandals that continued to fascinate historians. You probably wouldn't survive a single encounter with her without keeping your wits sharp and your mouth shut. Historians still argue about the extent to which her reputation as a fierce combatant reflects fact versus romanticized legend. But the stories endure with an almost hypnotic pull. Bonny's rise to notoriety begins under the shadow of the infamous pirate, Calico Jack Rackham. You trudge past coiled ropes and barrels, imagining the strategic alliances she formed, the whispered plans of raids, and the daring maneuvers she executed alongside Rackham. Some quirky accounts suggest she dressed as a man to move freely among the crew, blending into the chaos of pirate life while concealing her identity. Scholars still debate whether this cross-dressing was pragmatic, symbolic, or exaggerated over time. Yet, it underscores her resourcefulness and willingness to defy societal constraints. Life aboard the ship with Bonny is electrifying, filled with tension, strategy, and occasional levity. You probably wouldn't survive long without noting the delicate balance between her audacity and the crew's perception of her skill and danger. Some sailors admired her fearlessness, others envied her cunning, and all recognized that she was a force to be reckoned with. Quirky stories tell of her wielding pistols and cutlasses with astonishing skill, reportedly matching or surpassing the men around her. Historians still debate how much combat she actually engaged in versus what became legend. But imagining the scenes of her in the thick of boarding actions sets your pulse racing. Scandal surrounds Bonny not only because of her audacity, but also due to her personal relationships. Her involvement with Calico Jack, and reportedly with Mary Read as well, adds layers of intrigue, suggesting alliances and romances that were both practical and personal. You trudge along imagining whispered conversations, secret strategies, and the delicate navigation of loyalty and desire aboard a ship where every misstep could be fatal. Scholars still argue over the authenticity and nature of these relationships, yet they contribute to the enduring fascination surrounding her life. Raids under Bonny's command, or alongside Rackham, are lessons in audacity. You trudge past imagined merchant ships brimming with cargo, the glint of gold coins and exotic goods catching your eye as her crew moves with practiced precision. Quirky tales suggest she sometimes participated in playful deception, like hiding weapons in plain sight or using theatrical gestures to frighten opponents into surrender. Historians still debate the prevalence and effectiveness of such tactics, but they create a vivid picture of her innovative, daring approach to piracy. Daily life aboard her ship blends discipline, humor, and ritual. Sailors consult stars for navigation, carry charms for protection, and adhere to informal codes of conduct. You probably wouldn't survive a week without understanding these systems, which balanced safety, superstition, and morale. Some accounts claim Bonny insisted on fair distribution of loot and even intervened in disputes, a reflection of both her leadership and the social fluidity aboard pirate ships. Scholars still argue whether these stories reflect consistent behavior or anecdotal embellishment, yet they enrich the narrative of her life. Bonny's scandals extended to her capture and trial. You trudge through imagined courtroom proceedings, the tension palpable as she faces charges that could cost her life. Her defiance during questioning, reportedly flaunting her fearlessness and cunning, leaves a lasting impression. Some quirky stories suggest she may have feigned pregnancy to avoid execution, a tactic historians still debate. You probably wouldn't survive the mental strain of such a trial without imagining every gesture, every word, every calculated glance as part of a high-stakes performance. Her influence continues to ripple through pirate lore. You trudge along, imagining the whispers in taverns, the exaggerated retellings of her battles, and the admiration or envy she inspired among sailors and civilians alike. Historians still argue about the exact details of her later life after imprisonment, but the combination of audacity, scandal, and skill ensures her place among the most infamous pirates of all time. Quirky legends persist, including tales of her escaping from prison or returning to sea incognito, further blurring fact and folklore. Even amidst danger, humor persists. You probably wouldn't survive without noticing the playful, cunning aspects of her personality. Mock duels, clever pranks, and strategic storytelling that entertained while simultaneously intimidating. Her ability to balance fear, respect, and amusement sets her apart from her contemporaries, illustrating the multidimensional life of a pirate whose story is both thrilling and scandalous. As night deepens and the Caribbean stars twinkle overhead, you feel the pull of Bonny's presence in every shadow and gust of wind. You trudge to the rail, imagining her standing there, fearless and commanding, the waves crashing against the hull and the salt spray mixing with the electric tension of unspent energy. Every whispered rumor, daring raid, and legendary escapade contributes to a tapestry that historians continue to examine, debate, and embellish. By the time the wind dies down and the deck settles into a gentle sway, Anne Bonny's world is alive around you. Danger, audacity, humor, and scandal mingling like the scents and sounds of a restless sea. You trudge along, feeling the thrill and tension, understanding that her life, whether fully factual or partially myth, embodies the paradoxical allure of pirate history. She is audacious, scandalous, and unforgettable, a force who challenges everything you thought you knew about piracy. Mary Read steps into your imagination, a shadowy, daring figure whose presence reshapes everything you thought you knew about pirates. You trudge across the deck, feeling the sway beneath your boots, smelling the salty tang of the sea, mixed with the faint aroma of sweat and tar. Like Anne Bonny, she defies convention, blending skill, audacity, and scandal into a single, unforgettable narrative. You probably wouldn't survive a single day in her company without nerves of steel, cunning reflexes, and an ability to adapt instantly. Historians still argue whether some of her exploits were exaggerated by rumor or solidly grounded in first-hand accounts. But the thrill of imagining them is unmistakable. Mary's life as a pirate is filled with both daring deeds and calculated strategy. You trudge past barrels of supplies, hammocks swinging in the breeze, and maps strewn across the captain's table. Her skill in combat is legendary, reportedly matching or surpassing her male counterparts, wielding swords and pistols with precision. Quirky stories suggest she sometimes donned male attire even off the ship, not just to hide her identity, but as a symbol of equality and daring. Scholars still debate the exact reasons and frequency of this cross-dressing, but it emphasizes her resourcefulness and the blurring of gender expectations in pirate society. Daily routines aboard her ship balance discipline, superstition, and occasional levity. You probably wouldn't survive a week without understanding the codes and rituals that governed her crew. Sailors consulted the stars, carried protective charms, and adhered to unwritten rules that balanced survival, morale, and hierarchy. Quirky tales recount competitions among the crew, mock duels, clever pranks, and storytelling contests, all of which Mary reportedly participated in and sometimes orchestrated. Historians still argue about the authenticity of these anecdotes, yet they vividly illustrate the rhythms of life aboard a pirate vessel. Mary's alliances and personal relationships are steeped in both strategy and scandal. You trudge along imagining whispered conversations with Anne Bonny, plotting raids and navigating the delicate balance of loyalty, fear, and trust. Some accounts suggest the two women shared both camaraderie and rivalry, their bond cemented by shared danger and defiance. Scholars still debate the nature of their partnership, but imagining the dynamic, an unbreakable mix of trust, competition, and cunning is electrifying. Raids under Mary's influence are audacious and theatrical. You trudge past imagined merchant ships glinting with treasure, feeling the tension in every swing of ropes, every shouted command, and every glint of steel. Quirky stories suggest she had a knack for misdirection, sometimes orchestrating decoy attacks or cleverly using disguises to confuse enemies. Historians still argue how often these tactics were employed, but they underscore her intelligence, strategic mind, and flair for drama. The scandals surrounding Mary extend to capture and imprisonment. You trudge through imagined scenes of colonial courts, guards whispering, and the weight of potential execution pressing on every motion. Some accounts describe her revealing her gender only at the moment of trial, a move both scandalous and pragmatic. Scholars still debate whether this was a common practice or a sensationalized detail, but it exemplifies the sharp thinking required to navigate a world that constantly underestimated her. Even in moments of danger, humor and eccentricity persist. You probably wouldn't survive without noticing the subtle pranks, witty exchanges, and playful jabs that punctuate tense moments aboard pirate ships. Mary reportedly used humor and cunning to maintain control, morale, and loyalty, highlighting the human capacity to find lightness amid constant threat. Quirky legends suggest she sometimes staged playful mock battles to train the crew while keeping spirits high. Her death and legacy are wrapped in as much mystery and debate as her life. You trudge past imagined graveyards, abandoned harbors, and silent waves, contemplating the stories that persist, heroic feats, daring escapes, and whispered legends of survival beyond recorded history. Historians still argue about the exact details of her final days, but the fascination endures, making her one of the most enigmatic and scandalous figures in pirate history. By the time the Caribbean night blankets the horizon, Mary Read's world is alive around you. Danger, cunning, audacity, humor, and scandal interweaving like the wind, waves, and creaking timbers beneath your boots. You trudge along the deck, feeling the thrill, tension, and complexity of a life lived boldly against every expectation. Her story, intertwined with Anne Bonny's, Blackbeard's, and the other infamous pirates you've encountered, forms a rich tapestry of audacity, human frailty, and scandal that historians continue to unravel centuries later. The night softens as you lean against the rail, the gentle sway of the ship lulling your thoughts into calm reflection. Waves lap quietly against the hull, carrying with them the echoes of the stories you've traversed tonight. Lives lived at the edges of law, danger, and desire. Each scandal, audacious raid, and whispered legend fades into the hush of the ocean, leaving only the quiet rhythm of water and wind. You breathe deeply, feeling the cool air mix with the memory of salt, tar, and the faint warmth of fire from the lanterns above. Even the most notorious pirates were human, flawed, clever, daring, and sometimes absurdly funny. The echoes of Edward Lowe's unpredictability, Samuel Bellamy's charm, Blackbeard's theatrical terror, Anne Bonny's audacious defiance, and Mary Read's cunning remind you that history is never black and white. Their stories are a blend of documented fact, whispered rumor, and the imaginative exaggerations that time and retelling inevitably produce. You let that complexity settle in your mind, feeling both awe and quiet amusement at their audacity. The ocean stretches endlessly before you, dark yet soothing, carrying your thoughts like driftwood. You feel a gentle calm, the tension of battle, fear, and scandal slowly giving way to the rhythmic, hypnotic sway of waves. You can almost hear faint laughter, the murmur of strategy, and the sighs of pirates resting after another day of audacity. The stories linger, but now they are softened, no longer threatening, merely echoing as gentle reminders of courage, cunning, and the unpredictable beauty of life at sea. Slowly, your eyes grow heavy. You imagine the stars twinkling above, the wind whispering softly, and the gentle rocking of a ship that carries both history and imagination. The scandal, bravery, humor, and cunning of these pirates have taken you on a journey, but now it is time to release the tension, let the night carry you, and drift into calm, untroubled sleep. End of story. Sweet dreams.